everyone. It is my privilege at this time to introduce our speaker for the morning. Jonathan McKee comes from California. He spoke this morning in our first service where it would have been 5:30 in the morning his time. And so he is, well, I don't know if you drink energy drinks or how you keep going, but he is wide awake and ready to speak to us again. What he shares with us is so important. As I said earlier, we need to be proactive as Christians and as a body of Christ and as parents. And so Jonathan's going to come and preach the word this morning and also share some things that plant a few seeds that will be there for you to come back this afternoon. Like I said, Jonathan has authored over 20 books, and he travels the world speaking, doing seminars in churches and also in schools. So would you welcome this morning Jonathan McKee?
Yeah, thanks, brother. Thanks so much. It's good to be here. Music was amazing. It's kind of cool to see in the first service and the second service, good stuff. So privileged to be here. I'm finally awake right now. I'm finally got here. It is. I love it. You got a blanket. That is awesome. They are like cuddling up in a blanket. That is good. You know the temperature's right when people are in a blanket. So I'm glad to be here. I'm looking forward to not just this morning, but this afternoon, where we're going to be really diving into kind of a deeper look into this culture and a lot of what young people are hearing and seeing, and how we as moms and dads and grandmas and grandpas and aunts and uncles can make a difference by engaging with them. Because really what we're talking about today is, it doesn't matter if you're a parent or not, we as a church, how do we open up doors of conversation about truth in a world so overflowing with lies? What does that look like? Not just in the home, but in our community, in our workplace, with our neighbors. And that's what we'll be talking about this morning. And I encourage you, even if you aren't a parent, if you're a grandparent, someone who cares about this younger generation, I encourage you to come back this afternoon as we'll be diving in on that. It's funny, my kids are now 20, 22, and 24, which officially I think makes me old. It has been so neat to see my dad and mom, how they've been grandparents to my kids. Last weekend, while I was speaking in Pennsylvania, I had to actually think, where was I last weekend? Pennsylvania, my dad and mom went and visited one of my daughters down at college because they're so involved in their lives. So I want to encourage so many of you as grandparents about the amazing impact you can make. Well, let's talk about this, opening up these doors of dialogue, because communication has changed. It's amazing how fast it's changed. In the last decade, how fast it's changed. And there's been many different influencers in that change. I'd say one of the biggest influencers is this device I got right here in my pocket. It was 10 years ago, think about it, it's 2017 now, and it was 2007 when a guy stood up on a stage and made an announcement about a new invention, a piece of technology that, as Steve Jobs said there to the people at Apple, would change everything. And his words proved to be prophetic, because it has changed everything. See, not a lot of people had smartphones back then. Some people did. They weren't very smart, and they had these clunky keyboards. But when the iPhone came out, it was interesting because this device, as it started to get into young people's pockets, it started changing the way they communicated. See, that was in 2007. By 2012, America crossed the 50% mark for smartphone ownership. That means over half of our nation had smartphones in their pockets. And of course, when one new smartphone came out, very often moms and dads gave kids the other smartphones, so they started to get them. Now, as we sit here today in 2017, over 75% of 12 through 17-year-olds have smartphones. And this is changing the way they communicate. I'll touch on this a little bit in the workshop, but I mean, literally, there are surveys and tests out there where they test young people's ability to communicate. And it's interesting because young people are so used to communicating like this that they're having trouble communicating like this. And we're seeing so many different changes. Not only that, the fact that a smartphone, unlike the old phones where you could text and you could talk, a smartphone carries around your entire entertainment media library. So with a smartphone, you can have all your music with you, you can watch TV, you can watch movies, you can engage in social media, all with this little device you carry around with them. And as that guy on the Apple stage said, it has changed everything. So a lot of people in the church, we don't know exactly how to react with this. As a matter of fact, sometimes we see some very extreme reactions. With parents, I see two extremes. The first extreme, if we were literally to divide this room down the middle, and if this represented our country, I would say that especially in the church, I very often will see what is the, believe it or not, the overly permissive parent. And you say, wait, in the church? No, we don't have those in the church, do we? But, I mean, have a little compassion, because here's how it starts. It usually starts because a kid comes up and asks and says, Mom, can I, please, can I have it? Can I? And sometimes it's just through that war of attrition, that wearing them down, that sometimes maybe in a moment of weakness or something, Mom finally goes, yes. And the kid goes, okay. And Mom thinks, well, that was pretty simple. So they try it again with Mom and Dad, and they just, yes. They become the yes parent, and they say yes to everything because, I mean, it's kind of easier that way, and there's less war in the house. And we've seen examples of yes parents. We've seen examples of parents that have kind of said yes to everything, and we kind of saw how that worked. And it's amazing because if you ask yes parents, sometimes all of a sudden they will actually look back in hindsight, and if they were to have a do-over, they would say, maybe I would have done things a little differently. Maybe I would have, instead of being the friend parent, maybe I would have said enough is enough, and I would have actually been the parent. The overly permissive parent sometimes finds out the hard way that, see, we live in a country right now where the average age that a young person gets a smartphone is 10.3 years old. So when third and fourth graders are getting these phones, and all of a sudden now they're being raised not by Mom and Dad, but they're being raised by Nicki Minaj and Amy Schumer, and some of you are like, who are those people? Exactly. When they're being raised by people like that, we're finding that very often they're kind of changing their behaviors a little bit. And so many parents, especially in the church, when we see the example of the overly permissive parent, we think, I would never be that, so we immediately go completely to the opposite side of the room, and we become the overprotective parents. And we see so many examples of that, where all of a sudden we think, I'm going to solve this technology problem. I'm just going to unplug everything, and we're going to move to Amish, Pennsylvania. Problem solved, all right? Because over there, they have no problems whatsoever. Newsflash, remember, last weekend I was speaking in Pennsylvania. I actually go to Amish, Pennsylvania quite a lot and speak in very conservative Mennonite Brethren churches. I spoke to ex-Amish people sitting there in the workshop. I spoke where literally there's people that have come in and they said, okay, guess what? We're dealing with this stuff here. And I'm like, here in Lancaster County? Yes, even in Lancaster County. Once when I was speaking at a Mennonite Brethren church, I came and I remember they had told me they wanted me to come and do very similar to what I was going to do this morning. I'm going to talk a little bit about where's youth culture is at, and here's how we respond. Well, very often one of the things I'll do is I'll put up on the stage, here's the lyrics of some of the top songs, here's some of the TV shows people are watching, and I kind of warn the audience because it can be a little bit shocking. Well, that particular morning, that was the plan, but as I was driving to church, I'm in my rental car driving to church, and a buggy pulls out in front of me. And then another buggy. And I'm following these buggies to church, and I'm thinking, where am I preaching this morning, And as I pull up in the parking lot and I walk in, I'm dressed sort of like this, and they're all in slacks and ties, and many of the women had their heads covered. And so I walked over to the people that booked me, and I said, are you sure you want me to do this morning? I said, because that lady over there, she has a doily on her head. I'm not, I don't know if she's going to get this. And they said, no, we want you to tell us the truth. And I said, okay. So I stood up on stage, and as I started talking, I actually said, hey, here's some of the stuff that you're hearing. And believe it or not, yesterday, because when I go there, I decide that I want to go check it out for myself and see what influences are in the culture. So last time I was there in Lancaster County, I walked to their little French store they have. It's called Target. I don't know if you've ever seen this. And I said, hey, and it's right across the street from an Amish farm. No kidding. And I said, well, let me just look and see if they have the same influences over there that everybody else does. And sure enough, I walked up to the magazine racks, same magazines as I see everywhere else across the country. I went to the back of the store where they have these big plasma screens all across the back, and it's interesting because I looked at the music, and what music they were playing was the same music that they were playing, the same innocent stuff, a little sarcasm there, that they're playing all across the country. And it was interesting because as I stood up to talk in this very conservative church, I threw some lyrics up on the board, and I'm not kidding. The opening lyrics of the #1 song at the time were, "I woke up drunk, 2 hoes lying next to me." And I remember seeing doily lady's eyes go this big, And so I kept going. I was talking about how do we respond as I'm talking. She was just staring at me. She looked kind of like angry. She's staring. And as I finished, she walked up. And as my message is over and people were talking, she comes up and she goes like this. And she walks right up to me. And I thought, okay, it's okay. I'm a California guy. I'll take it. Here we go. They'll blame it on the California guy. She walks right up to me and she says, "Thank you." And I said, "Really? Because you look kind of angry." And she goes, no, thank you. I'm sorry. She goes, I'm thinking about this. She goes, because my kids, they listen to all that stuff. And this is a lady with her head covered. And I'm saying, well, really? This is Lancaster County. She says, my 5th grader, in his art class, the teacher lets them play all their music as long as it's the clean versions. I'll talk a little bit more about clean versions this afternoon. And she says, and he hears all this stuff all the time. See, the thing that's interesting about us, as if we sometimes think, I want to protect our kids, which is really good. It's a good notion. We want to protect them, and we should. There's things we should do to try to raise our kids in an atmosphere where they're not being bombarded by distractions. But at the same time, sometimes as the overprotective parent, we start making all their decisions for them and trying to block everything. And we need to realize something. One, we can't block everything. I was actually interviewing when I was writing a book to parents about how to have the conversations about sex and intimacy. I was interviewing a guy who is the leading guy for a ministry to people addicted to pornography. And he provides all these different blocks to Wi-Fi signals and stuff that you can put in your house to try to block out the bad stuff. And as I was interviewing him, true story, he was at that time installing some software in on his machines, and he was installing a router, which is the thing that sends the Wi-Fi signal to his house. And he says, yeah, I'm installing this router right now in my house so that when my kids' friends come over, then even them, when they all jump on and grab this signal, it will block, all the bad stuff from in there. And this, again, a leading expert in this kind of stuff. I asked him one question. I was interviewing him for this book, this chapter I was writing about pornography. And I asked him, I said, well, what if they don't jump on your Wi-Fi signal and they just use their AT&T or their Verizon signal? Silence. Silence. I stumped him for a quick second. He goes, well, young people, they like to connect because of downloads and they don't want to use. And here's the bottom line. No matter how many blocks and stuff we provide, kid can always go to school and say, hey, can I see your phone? And look at their friend's phone. Think of the stuff that sometimes our friends introduced us to when we were kids. We can't block everything. It doesn't mean that we should let our kids watch everything, but sometimes it's sad because it's tough out there, and whether we're, maybe letting our kids do too much or whether we're tightening a gap. I know some people are sitting there looking and saying, Jonathan, these aren't two really good choices here. Isn't there somewhere in between where we can have a relationship with our kids, have some conversation, help point towards truth without overreacting? What's this look like? And now that we've all got technology in our pockets, it's even more difficult because now we've got something that we don't even barely understand that they've got. How do we do this? And a lot of parents, when it comes to, like, for example, whether we're going to use any of these parental controls that come with this device, what does that look like? Well, there's people that actually do surveys and they ask parents how much they are involved in their kids' lives. For example, Pew Research asks parents, how much are you involved? Are you having these conversations about technology? Are you using parental controls? Surprisingly enough, only 50% of parents have actually used parental controls on devices such as this one right here. Sadly, even less, 46% of parents, only 46%, less than half of parents, have actually talked with their kids about an online profile. Think of the ramifications of that. The online profile is basically who they're talking with and how they represent themselves when they're chatting with strangers, so to speak. So you've got 10-year-olds, you got 4th graders getting onto social media accounts, which, by the way, they're not supposed to be on. And sorry if there's any middle schoolers here. I hate to let the cat out of the bag. But according to the FTC, the Child Online Privacy Protection Act, it's called COPA, you have to be 13 to be on Instagram, Snapchat, Facebook. You have to be 13 years old. So those 11-year-olds and 10-year-olds who are on that have actually lied about their age to be on that. A whole different subject. We'll talk about that a little bit more tonight. But what we have is we have a 10-year-old and 11-year-old navigating conversations, and they think they're talking to an 18-year-old from Huntington Beach, but actually they're talking to a 44-year-old pedophile in his basement in Cleveland. And they have no idea, and mom or dad has never even talked to them about that. So this makes it really tough. And a lot of us as moms and dads, we're sitting there saying, I don't even know what to do with this. How do we possibly open up these doors of dialogue with young people in a world that's overflowing with so many distractions? And for a lot of us, we're sitting there saying, how do we even look for guidance? I mean, I'd love to look to the Bible for guidance, but some of us are sitting there saying, is this even going to be relevant on this subject? It's amazing how relevant the Bible is on this subject. I mean, and we're going to be in the New Testament today, but I tell you, we could jump back to the parenting passage in the Bible. The parenting passage where Moses was talking, believe it or not to just parents. He was talking like I'm talking to you this morning, to all of God's people, parents, grandparents, people that just cared about the next generation. And in this particular passage in Deuteronomy chapter 6, that's where Moses stood before him and said, hey, remember what God did for us? His story, his laws, let's impress it not only on our hearts, but let's impress this to the next generation. Let's help them not forget what God did for us. And then he gets very specific to God's people, like I'm going to get with you right now, on what that might look like in our homes. He says, impress this on your children. Ready? He tells us when. When you're sitting at home, when you're walking along the road, when you lie down, when you get up. He goes on in everything you think, in everything you do. He starts talking about not just drop off your kids at youth group once a week, not just get your kids to church, they'll be fine. He says, as you're getting up in the morning, as you're walking along the road, as you're going to bed at night, and everything, be engaging in this dialogue. And I know there's some people right now that even as you're listening, you're saying, Jonathan, hey, newsflash, I don't know how it is out there in California, but here we have jobs, okay? We're gone during the day. Some of you might even be saying, I get up, I'm at work by the time the kids are going off to school, by the time they're done with sports and home, we try to have a family meal, they're doing homework. I mean, we interact a little bit, but I mean, come on. Who has our kids' ears morning, noon, and night? Sobering question. Who has our kids' ears morning, noon, and night? I'll answer that question because there's a lot of guys that do research and ask that exact question. Common Sense Media actually asked that question among teenagers. And for 12 through 17-year-olds, spoiler alert, 9 hours a day. 9 hours a day is the average. When you add up all the TV, all the music, all the social media, all the time on the smartphone. Matter of fact, they break it down if they want. They break it down with the tweens, 8 through 12-year-olds, teenagers, 12 through 17-year-olds. The smartphone alone, 2 hours and 42 minutes a day. And so when they add up all this, and by the way, many people aren't surprised by that because when we see young people, they're always staring at their device. And guess what? This is changing the way young people think. It's changing everything. And I know there might be some skeptical people here saying, Jonathan, are you sure you aren't overreacting here? Are you sure it's changing everything? Okay, let me just give you one example. Ready? Here's one change in the last 5 years. The selfie. You hear that word, selfie? If I would have said the word selfie 5 years ago, you would have said, huh? Because it wasn't a word. Think about this. Smartphones didn't really hit past the 50% mark till 2012. And so before then, people weren't taking pictures and posting them of themselves there because they didn't have the mobile access. Matter of fact, honestly, in this country, the word selfie didn't really start circling in adult circles till probably the famous 2014 Oscar selfie, even though young people knew about it a little more, before that. And so now we live in a day and age where everybody's posting selfies all the time. And if there's a celebrity, there's celebrity selfies. There's the famous Kardashian sister selfie. I can never tell them apart. Do you know which one's which? I never. But the average millennial takes 9 selfies a week, spending 7 minutes on average perfecting each one. That's 54 hours of selfies each year. That's 25,700 selfies in their lifetime. And that's something that wasn't even in existence 5 years ago. This is something that goes around in their back pocket with them. And a lot of us as parents and grandparents, we're like, man, when it comes to all that social media, that stuff that's flowing from that device there, I don't even know what a lot of it is. And by the way, that's why we're having this parent workshop this afternoon. That's why we want to educate parents and grandparents and aunts and uncles a little bit about this. Because, for example, maybe their favorite one, Snapchat, right there, that one alone, parents will come up to me. I'll be standing by my book table afterwards, and people come and they'll ask me this. They'll say, Jonathan, is Snapchat bad? That's the question I'll get. Is Snapchat bad? And it's just tough because their 12-year-old, their 15-year-old, their 7-year-old uses Snapchat all the time. Confession, my 20-year-old is away on Europe semester right now. She's in the Czech Republic right now. She's doing 17 different countries. She's a history major, and she's traveling to all these different countries. And so I am just getting texts and social media communication from her. And I love this device because this is how I contact my little baby, man. My little baby 20-year-old. And she uses I love Snapchat because Snapchat is a way I can communicate with her. And she posts little videos of what she's doing that day. And I saw her on her hotel terrace in the Czech Republic just yesterday through Snapchat. And it's funny because sometimes parents want the blanket, is Snapchat bad? When frankly, a lot of our kids might be innocently using Snapchat. But at the parent workshop, I'm going to share 3 concerns that parents need to know about Snapchat. And one of them's kind of vital. One of them's in my new book that I wrote, and it's, I'll give you a quick glimpse. It's the fact that a lot of young people think, hey, Snapchat, the pictures disappear. I can post whatever I want, and it won't come back to haunt me. And sadly, there's a lot of young people that are realizing, oh, wait, there is a way people are grabbing those pictures. And that's one of the things I'm talking about. By the way, you're one of the first churches that actually I have this book at. This book just came out, where I'm talking to young people in school assemblies. I talk with them about this stuff all the time because there's this learning curve where a lot of them are going, wait a second, I thought this was a private conversation. And stuff is coming back to haunt them that they didn't realize when they post it, it's posted, it's out there. And a lot of young moms and dads aren't even having these conversations. And a lot of moms and dads, when it comes to these devices that our kids like, because there's so many different devices that they're on which they're communicating with people that they've never even met before. On all these different devices, a lot of us as moms and dads and as grandparents, we're overwhelmed. And we're like, how do we possibly make a difference in young people's lives when they're hearing from so many different sources? They're connected to so much entertainment media. And for 9 hours a day, what are they hearing? What are they gleaning from these sources? How can we possibly respond to a generation that is absolutely saturated in secular culture at a rate of 9 hours a day? How can we possibly respond to a generation of young people that are growing up often hearing more lies than truth? How can we react? Believe it or not, there's a biblical example, and it's in Acts chapter 17. Because in Acts chapter 17, we're going to take a look at the Apostle Paul. And you know what? Just to show you that this device isn't bad, I'm going to use my e-Bible right here on my device right here, and I'm going to turn to Acts chapter 17, and I encourage you to open up to Acts 17, because the Apostle Paul is going to interact with a group of people who, ready for this, are absolutely saturated in all kinds of different secular ideas from all the nations around them. He is going to interact with a group of people that are absolutely fascinated with all the different gods, all the different everything around them. And that is the people of Athens. I love this example here, and we're going to peek at it. One of the reasons I like this example is because Paul grew up in the church. He grew up religious. The sad thing about Paul, and maybe some people can relate to this, is that Paul grew up so religious that he didn't even have a relationship with God. Now that sounds counterintuitive, but he got so caught up in the religion, do this, do that, don't walk this far on Sunday, wash your hands like this, that he kind of became more fascinated with the rules than the relationship with God. To the point that God up in heaven literally looked down at Paul and said, I got to talk to this guy. I'm going to confront him. And so Jesus shows up, boom, appears before Paul, and Paul hits the ground and blinded Ironically, for the first time in his life, he saw clearly. Blinded, he saw clearly. And everything changed in his life. Even his name, from Saul to Paul. And now Paul's message changed. It wasn't do this, do that. Now it was like, man, I was messed up. And now I met Jesus. And let me tell you about this relationship with God you can have through Jesus. And people were like, tell me more. Paul was now like one beggar showing another beggar where the food source was. He was like, hey, come here. I needed this. You might need this too. Check this out. And as he goes here to the city of Athens, this is yet another group of people that and by the way, there's some people that didn't like this message. There was these religious snobs who really liked the rules. And they actually had just chased him out. If you look at the previous couple chapters here, they chased him out of town. They tried to put him in jail. And here he finally gets to Athens. He's waiting for his friends to show up. And while he's there, he sees this group of people that were fascinated with all the different gods and all the different ideas. And as he goes, we're going to see how he responds when he sees these people in this culture. I mean, and I'll tell you something. We're going to learn a little bit about them here just in these few verses. Let's read Acts chapter 17, starting in verse 16. As I look here in verse 16, hold on. Okay, I'm there. While Paul was waiting for them in Athens, he was greatly distressed to see that the city was full of idols. Pause right there for a moment. He was greatly distressed when he saw that the city was full of idols. And boy, let me tell you something. When I say full of idols, Athens at that time, Athens is an import-export town, so all these different people coming with all their different ideas, and this was a city where everything was okay. Oh, you worship this God? Sure. You worship this God? Sure. And so there was idols everywhere. As he looked around, he saw these idols. There was even an idol that said, to an unknown God, just in case they missed one. I mean, the people of Athens had stickers in the back of their chariots that said, coexist. Everything's okay, I'm sure all these gods probably all lead to somewhere good. Sound familiar? That's exactly where he was at. And as he sees this and he's looking around at the God of this, the God of that, all this stuff, he was distressed with what he saw. And some of us can relate because when we look sometimes, especially into this window of youth culture today, sometimes we're distressed with what we see. Some people, admittedly, in my parent workshop this afternoon, I let them know, wear seat belts, hold on for the first hour of my presentation because we're going to take a sobering glimpse into the world of youth culture. I'll give you just a peek. I'll give you a PG peek. And by the way, I'm going to show some lyrics. I'm going to show you a little bit. Some of you might be offended with what you see, and if you are, good. You should be. Because this is what young people have. You walk into Walmart today, this is possibly the songs you're going to hear playing. See, when you look into, and by the way, we write on our website, thesourceforparents.com. It's a free resource we have for parents. We write these youth culture window articles all the time and try to give a glimpse of the typical living room in America. The typical living room in America, by the way, is mom and dad sitting down watching a big screen while a teenager is up in their bedroom on a small screen, the toddler's on the floor flicking colors across another screen, and the dog's on the treadmill because no one will walk him. That's the typical American home right now, all right? And if you look at some of the programming, good and bad, that's out there, there's some fun programs, there's some family programs, there's some funny programs, and you look at what are people learning from these programs? We live in a world now where cartoons aren't all innocent anymore. We have all kinds of shows out there that have celebrity role models out there, and some are really fun and some are really nice, and some, as we get to know them more and more, we start to hear their points of view. And some people are adopting that point of view because these are their role models on their favorite TV show. And by the way, I haven't even talked about the fact that America, 91% of Americans pay for television. So you don't just get the old shows that you used to get on rabbit ears. You get these new shows with, they're all kinds of content that they're not subject to all the ratings and all that kind of stuff as everybody else. Or let's go to the place where young people love to stream most of this stuff right onto their devices. And the shows they watch that are the TV-14, quote-unquote, acceptable shows. This is the stuff that young people watch in their bedrooms. This is the music that young people are listening to right on their devices. And no, it's not music they have to pay for because there's all these great sources out there where you can get it free. This is where it becomes difficult as a parent or a grandparent because we hear songs like, for instance, last year, Everywhere you went, you might have not even known you were hearing the song, but everywhere you went, you heard the song Work by Rihanna, all right? Now, Rihanna is a very talented girl. She's got some very catchy stuff. And like last year, this song, Work, was at the top of the charts. And this is an example of one of those songs where you're like, what? I'm not really sure. I heard her saying work, work, work. What is it? And so maybe we even, if trying to be a good parent, we go to Google and we type in Rihanna, Work, lyrics. And that way we can do, let's try that right now. Let's look at the lyrics of this song, Work, which was one of the #1 songs, more than any other song last year. Let's look at that right now. Here we go.
Work, 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 work. You see me, I be work, 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 work. You see me do me dirt, 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 dirt. Tell me about that work, 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 work. When you walk a line, 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 line. I'm in the cafe, man, ta, 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 ta.
Mom, can I listen to Work? I don't know. What's it mean? I honestly have no idea. This is difficult as a mom and dad. So maybe we go in and we type, okay, Rihanna, Work, lyrics, meaning. And then maybe we look at some blogs and you know, Billboard sometimes has some things where they say, here's what the lyrics are, and they talk about, this is difficult. This is difficult because our kids are like streaming this stuff or listening to it if we're even in conversation with them and we're aware of this. And I'm going to talk about that at the Parent Workshop, what we can do to open up those avenues of conversation. But I mean, think about that right now with the Billboard charts today. You jump on there today and look, the #1 song is a song by an ex-stripper by the name of Cardi B, who is singing a song that, honestly, I can't even put her lyrics up on the board. There'd be more asterisks than there would be words if I'm trying to block stuff out. We'll go through a little bit at the workshop. You go to the second song, Rockstar. Does it get any better? It's by these 21 Savage and Post Malone. I'll give a glimpse this afternoon of the lyrics, but honestly, I better not hear again. Let me tell you this. In the first 7 seconds, he talks about sleeping with prostitutes, popping pills, smoking weed, and shooting people with his Uzi, which is, of course, very politically correct in this climate right now, which is with things such as, you know, Las Vegas and stuff just happening. But yet, both the first 2 songs talk about retaliating with violence, by the way. That's just the first 2 songs. Oh, I know. Let's go to the 5th song. It's Taylor Swift. That'll be a lot better, right? Because Taylor Swift has always at least kept it clean. Well, what if our kids go on to YouTube? What if they watch this Taylor Swift video, which we're going to do at the Parent Workshop? What are they going to catch? I mean, the lyrics might not seem bad, and they might seem a little angry. I mean, she says, I've got a list of names, and yours is in red, underlined. I check it once, check it twice. Oh, look what you made me do. She repeats it. Look what you made me do. Look what you made me do. Look what you made me do. I don't trust nobody. Nobody trusts me. I'll be the actress starring in your bad dreams. By the way, if you're a single guy, my advice to you is don't ever date Taylor Swift because she will write a song about you. Angry little girl. Bad relationships. It's interesting. More later on that. Oh, let's go to Sorry Not Sorry, because this is from a Disney girl. And as we know, all Disney stars turn out to be wholesome young ladies. And so, you know, and she's got this, well, I'll put up a couple lines and we'll save the rest for the Parent Workshop. Baby, I'm sorry, not sorry. Baby, I'm sorry, I'm not sorry. Being so bad got me feeling so good. If we go into the next lines, it'd get explicit, so we'll save that for the workshop. And that's the Disney stars. How about the Spanish songs on the top of the chart? There's 2 of them right now. One is called Despacito. A lot of us are like, I have no idea what they're saying. And maybe our kids don't know what it's saying either. Maybe that's a good thing until they jump on and see the music video. And it's pretty evident what's going on in the music video. As a matter of fact, it's so evident to the fact that even secular, you know, periodicals are sitting there saying, well, this is some pretty raunchy stuff out there. And I'll take a little peek, but I mean, in short, basically, very seductive stuff out there. And this is in a world where a lot of parents, especially in the church, are like, oh, my kids aren't thinking about this at all. I'm like, do they have ears? Because this is everywhere. And when you look at the top dozen songs, for example, that's how many of them are talking about sex and have sexual imagery. That's how many of them have explicit references to the female anatomy. You wouldn't even believe it. Curse the whole thing. And by the way, this is just the stuff that is the top of the charts that young people are frequenting all the time. And we'll go into more detail at the Parent Workshop. The common parental response when they glimpse around at this culture is overreaction. The common response is overreaction. A lot of us, and rightly so, that we feel that way and we are upset by it. Paul, the Apostle Paul, as he looked at all the distractions, all the idolatry going on, he was distressed with what he saw. And if you're distressed, good. If you're not distressed by all this, check your pulse. Because something's wrong. We should be distressed with what we see. The question is, what do you do with that? If we all of a sudden let our anger take over, how is that going to help anything? What if we are like this guy? This guy was on Facebook. His daughter was saying bad stuff on Facebook, and she posted some negative stuff about the family. So when she went away to school, he hacked into her Facebook account, and he posted this video on his daughter's Facebook account. Watch this.
Ridiculous. Not happening. Disrespectful to me, your mother, your stepmother, your family, your friends, and yourself. So I'm going to put a stop to it. And I'm going to put a stop to it right now. That right there is your laptop. You see it's out here on the ground. This right here is my 45. That was the first round.
That guy's from Georgia. You could just tell. You can just tell. A lot of us are there. Matter of fact, there's some guys in the back right now. They're like, no. You got to use a shotgun. That's what does the trick. You have your friend throw it up in the air. You yell, pull. I guess that's how I think you guys talk. I'm not sure. How do I talk? Do I talk like a surfer? Whoa. Yo, parents, check this out. Okay. The thing that's so sad is as moms and dads, when we overreact, I know I've been there. I confess it all. I've got a book out there called If I Had a Parenting Do-Over, where I surveyed parents and said, if you go back and you do one thing over, and we talk about this a lot. But sometimes we overreact and we blow up, and what we don't think about, the fact is that there is a common response to our overreaction. And a common teenage response when we flip out is, you can't talk with dad about this. Don't ask mom. Don't ask dad. So because we break that trust, they're quiet. They avoid us. They sneak out because all we do is flip out. And we see it all the time. And it's sad because good, parents with good intentions and our kids come up and, well, where were you last night? I was out late. Were you with that boy? Chris, I knew I should have let you hang out with that boy. And then those same parents are like, how come my kids don't talk to me? Because they're afraid of getting busted. And this is tough as a parent. Again, I'm not saying let your kids do whatever you want. How do you respond? I'll tell you what, don't take it from me. Let's look at what the Apostle Paul does. Because the Apostle Paul, remember, encounters a group of people who are absolutely saturated with all these lies all the time. And when he sees their idols, we just saw right here, he was distressed with what he saw. So how is he going to react? Is he going to start tipping over idols? Is he going to get angry and blow up? Let's look. Verse 17. So he reasoned in the synagogue with both the Jews and the God-fearing Greeks, as well as in the marketplace day by day with those who happened to be there. A group of Epicurean Stoic philosophers began to debate with him, and some of them even asked, what is he saying? And as we keep reading, and I'd love to read the whole thing, but I'm paying attention that we're in a Baptist church. We're not in an Assembly of God church. If we're in an Assembly of God church, I could preach as long as I want, but we're a Baptist church, so we're going to keep it to. So here's the thing. As we go, some of the Baptists are like, what happens over there? Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. The thing is, here, he doesn't flip out. He doesn't start tipping over idols. He doesn't get angry. He starts reasoning with them. He starts, and the word debate comes up. By the way, debate doesn't mean violent exchange of words. It means a healthy exchange of words, reasoning back and forth, dialoguing back and forth. He, instead of overreacting, he starts interacting. As a matter of fact, we can get a glimpse of his speech, and I'd love to read the whole thing, but let me just summarize. It's probably one of the most famous speeches in the Bible, next to maybe Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. It's when Paul stands up on Mars Hill and he addresses these people of Athens. You know what he says? He basically says it like this. He goes, people of Athens, wow, you guys are really religious. I mean, look at all your idols. I mean, you're religious. There's idols for this God and this God. Matter of fact, you even have an idol to an unknown God. Hey, guess what? I know who that is. I know who this God is that you've been worshiping all along. And you know what? He's not made of stone or bronze. He's actually the creator of the universe. and the only God. Let me tell you about him. And Paul uses their idolatry as a springboard for conversation about truth. He uses the very distressing stuff he saw as a springboard for conversation. As a matter of fact, if you keep reading, you scroll down a little bit, he says, as some of your own poets have said, and he puts in quotes right there, we are his offspring. That quotes right there is quotes from someone that was a current poet of the day. Nowadays, that would be Lady Gaga or Lil Wayne. So he was probably quoting Little Antonius, whoever, back then, all right, 2,000 years ago. Little Antonius made it into the Bible because he goes, as your own poets have said, and if it was today, he'd be like, as your poet Taylor Swift says, look what you made me do. And I must ask, did I really? Did we? Is this a healthy response? And he started engaging in dialogue about it. He, instead of overreacting, he turned his overreaction into interaction. What if we... sorry about that. I got a little excited with the clicker there. And I'm completely lost there. There we go. What if we instead turned our overreaction into interaction? What if we turned our overreaction into interaction? What if instead of blowing up and flipping out, if we started, like the Apostle Paul, dialoguing about the situation? And Dad came up with me after the first service and shared a story that I thought was really good. And it was about one of his kids, who was a senior in high school, came up to him and said, Dad, I want to go to a movie with a bunch of friends. And this is a senior in high school. Senior high school had a lot of freedom, didn't usually even really ask permission. And he kind of said, why are you asking permission this time? Come to find out, the movie was 50 Shades of Grey. And this kid was a little bit kind of apprehensive and was like, almost kind of like, Dad, I kind of actually want your advice on this one. But it came out in, Dad, can I go to this movie? It's amazing because this dad had an opportunity to dialogue and go, well, what do you think you should do? Guess what? Next year when you're in your college dorm, I'm not going to tell you what to do. So what would you do? And they actually began interacting instead of overreacting. I wrote a book a couple years ago that ruffled a few feathers. Some people thought, what? It's just best to just show you. The book's titled The Zombie Apocalypse Survival Guide for Teenagers. Now, some Christians are like, zombie? What is this? You know what this is? This is just a fictional story of 3 teenagers surviving in a post-apocalyptic world. And since mom or dad isn't standing over their shoulder telling them what to do in every situation they get in, the question they're asking is, what is right? What's the right thing to do? All this is a little bit of story, some scripture, and discussion questions. It's our daily bread for teenagers. That's all it is. And we need to start looking for opportunities in real life to look at some of the stuff that is real for them and start saying, hey, how do we dialogue about the stuff that matters in life? Because there's going to be a time as like a parent, for example, we're going to come home and we're going to see our kid maybe watching something inappropriate. The question you have to ask yourself is, how are you going to respond? Are you going to respond like the overly permissive parent and say, oh, just watch whatever you want? Are you going to respond like the overprotective parent and say, fine, no computer at all ever till you're 18? When neither of those really work? How can we turn our overreaction into interaction? What's that look like in your home? What's that look like in your workplace with the people you work with? What's that look like in your world? Paul gives us a pretty good example of, instead of freaking out, opening up the doors of dialogue. What does that look like? We're going to talk a lot more about this afternoon. I encourage you to come back, invite some other parents, leave the kids at home. Let's pray. Lord God, this is tough for us. Many of us, we want to share the truth, but we live in a world just overflowing with lies. How do we springboard these conversations? God, on one hand, it's distressing when we see this stuff. And especially we as moms and dads, there's times where we want to say, no, this isn't allowed in the home, and that's good. But God, we know that they're encountering a lot of this stuff out there. How can we engage in some of this dialogue about truth in a world so full of lies? God, there's some people here that maybe for them, maybe they aren't a mom or dad, or maybe the kids are out of the house, and maybe really the thing is, our own hearts, because maybe we are distracted with so many of the lies in this world. And we're latching onto those lies even though we know the truth. God, we need you so badly. We need you to clear that junk out of our lives. We need you to renew us and refresh us. God, I pray that whoever we are this morning, whether we're someone who you're tugging at our hearts because we need to get right with you, or maybe we're a mom or a dad or a parent or a grandparent who cares about this young generation, we desperately want to be able to be a source of truth in their lives. We need you in this process, God. So we rely on you this morning. So God, we give you this, and we rely on you, and we pray these things in your precious name. Amen. Pastor Howard, come on up. Hope to see a bunch of you this afternoon. Thank you.
Election.